We offer you this cotton and food.
Thank you. Where is the gold in this land?
2 a.m., October 12, 1492, middle of the Atlantic Ocean. A sailor named Rodrigo de Triana is staring into the darkness from the crow's nest of the Pinta. He's exhausted, terrified. His crew has been at sea for 36 days with no land in sight. Then he sees something, a shadow in the moonlight. Tierra! Tierra! Land! Land! That scream changes everything. In the next few hours, Christopher Columbus will step onto a beach in the Bahamas. He'll plant a Spanish flag. He'll claim land that already belongs to millions of people. And he'll think he's reached Asia. He hasn't. He stumbled into 2 entire continents that Europeans didn't know existed. He's about to trigger the Columbian Exchange, the transfer of plants, animals, diseases, and people between hemispheres. Within a century, 90% of Indigenous Americans will be dead. Entire civilizations will collapse. Empires will fall. And Europe will become the most powerful force on the planet. All from this one moment. 3 ships, 90 men. 1 very lost Italian who can't do math. Let me tell you what actually happened, not the sanitized version you learned in school, the real story, with all its brilliance, brutality, and catastrophic consequences. Because October 12th, 1492, isn't just the day Columbus landed in the Americas. It's the day 2 worlds that had been separated for 15,000 years crashed together, and one of those worlds was about to be destroyed. This is the age of exploration, 115 years that shaped the next 500. Let's dive in. Here's something they don't teach you in school. Christopher Columbus was spectacularly bad at math. Born Cristoforo Colombo in Genoa, Italy, around 1451, this guy had one obsession: sailing west to reach Asia. Problem was, every educated person in Europe told him his calculations were completely wrong. Columbus claimed Asia was about 3,000 miles west of Europe. The actual distance? Over 12,000 miles. Think about that. He was off by 9,000 miles. That's like planning a road trip from New York to Los Angeles and thinking it'll take 3 hours. Every scientist, every sailor, every scholar told him the same thing. You're going to run out of food and water and die in the middle of the ocean. And they were absolutely right. If the Americas hadn't been sitting exactly where Columbus thought Asia was, his entire crew would have starved to death. Columbus didn't discover a new route to Asia. He got lucky. Incredibly, impossibly lucky. So why did Spain finally fund him? Timing. In 1492, Spain just wrapped up the Reconquista, 700 years of war driving Muslim rulers out of the Iberian Peninsula. King Ferdinand and Isabella were flush with victory and looking to expand. Portugal had the Africa route to Asia locked down. Spain needed another option. Columbus had been begging for funding for years. Different monarchs, different pitches. Everyone said no. Until Isabella finally agreed. The deal? Columbus gets 10% of all wealth discovered, governorship over new territories, and the title Admiral of the Ocean Sea. Not bad for a guy about to get completely lost. August 3rd, 1492. 3 ships leave Palos, Spain. The Santa Maria, Columbus's flagship, about 60 feet long. The Pinta and the Niña, smaller, faster caravels. Total crew, roughly 90 men. Sailors, criminals, desperate men willing to risk a suicide mission. They stop in the Canary Islands for repairs. Then, on September 6th, they head into the unknown. Day after day, nothing but water. Columbus keeps 2 logbooks, one real, one fake, with shorter distances to prevent the crew from panicking. By early October, the men are talking mutiny. Food's running low, water's getting stale. Columbus promises 3 more days. If we don't see land, we turn back. October 12th, 2 a.m. Rodrigo de Triana spots land. They'd been at sea 36 days since leaving the Canaries. Another week, and they would have had to turn back or die trying. Columbus names the island San Salvador, Sacred Savior. He thinks he's reached islands off the coast of Japan. He's convinced he's found the shortcut to Asia. He's wrong about everything, but that name sticks for 5 centuries.
Imagine you're standing on a Caribbean beach. You've lived on these islands your entire life. Your ancestors have been here for centuries. You know every plant, every fishing spot, every reef. Then you see something that shouldn't exist. 3 massive structures floating on the water, bigger than any boat you've ever seen. They have enormous white sheets catching the wind, and they're moving toward your shore. Your Taino. This is October 12th, 1492, and nothing in your entire understanding of reality has prepared you for what's about to happen. People climb off these structures, but they look wrong. Pale skin, layers of heavy fabric in the heat. Some wear shiny, hard coverings over their entire bodies. They carry strange objects that gleam like no material you've ever seen before. They're making sounds, speaking, but you can't understand a single word. Columbus and his crew are experiencing the same shock. He thinks he's reached Asia. He's looking for the Great Khan of China, the Emperor of Japan, gold temples, silk cities. Instead, he sees the Taino. He assumes they're Asian subjects of some distant emperor. But here's what's disturbing. Within hours of first contact, Columbus writes in his journal, "They ought to make good and skilled servants, for they repeat very quickly whatever we say to them. I think they can very easily be made Christians, for they seem to have no religion." Read that again. He's already planning enslavement and cultural erasure before he even knows their names. The Taino are generous. They bring parrots, cotton thread, spears, and food. They trade willingly. They're curious about these strange visitors. They welcome them. Columbus repays this hospitality by immediately planning conquest. He spends the next 3 months island hopping. Cuba, which he insists is mainland China, Hispaniola, modern Haiti, and Dominican Republic. He keeps asking where the gold is, where the cities are, where the emperor is. Nobody knows what he's talking about because they're not in Asia. Christmas Day, 1492. The Santa Maria runs aground off Hispaniola and has to be abandoned. Columbus uses the timber to build a small fort, La Navidad, Christmas. He leaves 39 men there with orders to search for gold and wait for his return. Then he sails back to Spain on the Niña and Pinta. He brings several Taino people with him, kidnapped, really, to present to Ferdinand and Isabella as proof of his discovery. March 15th, 1493, Columbus arrives in Barcelona to a hero's welcome. He parades through the city with kidnapped indigenous people, exotic parrots, gold ornaments, strange plants nobody's seen before. The Spanish court is amazed. Ferdinand and Isabella immediately authorize a second expedition, but much larger, way larger. September 1493. Columbus's second voyage departs with 17 ships and about 1,200 men. This isn't exploration anymore. This is colonization. Soldiers, settlers, priests, administrators. When they arrive back at La Navidad in November, they find the fort destroyed. All 39 men dead, killed by the Taino after the Spanish had spent months raping women and stealing gold. Columbus responds by establishing a new settlement, La Isabela, and implementing a brutal system. Every Taino person over 14 must provide a certain amount of gold every 3 months. Those who can't have their hands cut off. Meanwhile, Portugal is furious about Spain's new territories. The two Catholic nations are about to go to war. Pope Alexander VI steps in 1493 and 1494, through papal bulls and the Treaty of Tordesillas. He draws a line down the Atlantic Ocean. Everything east of the line belongs to Portugal. Everything west belongs to Spain. Think about the staggering arrogance. 2 European nations and the Pope dividing up the entire world. The millions of people already living on these lands? Not consulted, not even considered. Columbus makes 4 voyages total, between 1492 and 1504. He explores more of the Caribbean, he reaches the coast of Venezuela, he touches Central America, but until the day he dies in 1506, Columbus insists he reached Asia. He never admits he found a new continent. He dies relatively poor, bitter, still arguing about the money and titles he was promised. The continents won't be named America until 1507, after another Italian explorer, Amerigo Vespucci, correctly identifies that these are new lands unknown to Europeans. But the door Columbus opened will never close. Within 25 years, Spanish conquistadors will be conquering empires. Within 50 years, millions of indigenous people will be dead from disease. Within 100 years, the Atlantic slave trade will be in full operation. All from this moment. First contact, October 12th, 1492.
Now, we need to talk about what happened next. And I'm warning you, this gets dark. Really dark. But you need to understand this part, because this is where the real story of the Age of Exploration lives. Historians call it the Columbian Exchange, the transfer of plants, animals, diseases, and cultures between the Americas and Europe, Africa, and Asia. It sounds neutral, doesn't it? Exchange, like it was fair, equal, mutual. It wasn't. Here's what went from the Americas to the rest of the world. Potatoes, tomatoes, corn, chocolate, vanilla, tobacco, rubber. These crops would literally transform global agriculture and prevent famines in Europe and Asia. Here's what came to the Americas from Europe: wheat, sugar, horses, cattle, pigs, and smallpox, measles, typhus, influenza, bubonic plague, whooping cough, diphtheria, scarlet fever. That second list? Those diseases killed more indigenous people than all the conquistadors' weapons combined, and it's not even close. Let me explain why this happened and why it was so catastrophically one-sided. For 15,000 years, the Americas were isolated from the rest of the world. The people who lived there had no exposure to diseases that had evolved in Europe, Asia, and Africa, places where humans lived in close contact with domesticated animals like cows, pigs, and chickens. See, most of the deadliest diseases in human history jumped from animals to people. Smallpox came from cattle, measles from cattle and dogs, influenza from pigs and birds. Europeans, Asians, and Africans had been living with these diseases for thousands of years. Every generation, some people died, but many survived and developed immunity. Indigenous Americans had no immunity. None. Zero. When smallpox arrived in the Americas, it spread like wildfire in a dry forest. Imagine this. You're in a village, maybe 1,000 people. Everyone's healthy. Then someone from a neighboring village visits. They seem fine, but they're carrying something invisible, something your immune system has never encountered. Within a week, people start getting sick. A fever. Then these horrible pustules start appearing all over their bodies. Face, arms, chest, even inside the mouth and throat. The pain is unbearable. And it spreads. Within days, half the village is sick. A week later, almost everyone. The healthy can't care for the sick because there aren't enough healthy people left. People die. Not a few people, not some people, most people. One village after another, one region after another. Entire families wiped out, entire communities gone. The mortality rate for indigenous peoples encountering smallpox for the first time is between 30 and 90%. In some areas, it was even higher. And here's what makes it even more horrifying. The Spanish knew this was happening. Some even recognized they could use it as a weapon. There are documented cases of Europeans deliberately dimming indigenous people blankets and clothing from smallpox victims. Biological warfare in the 1500s. But wait, why didn't indigenous diseases wipe out Europeans? Why was it so one-sided? Simple. The Americas had far fewer domesticated animals. No cattle, no pigs, no chickens. They had llamas in South America, turkeys in North America, and dogs. That's pretty much it. Fewer domesticated animals meant fewer diseases jumping to humans. So indigenous peoples didn't have the same arsenal of deadly plagues to send back to Europe. There was one exception: syphilis. Historians debate this, but many believe syphilis originated in the Americas and traveled to Europe with Columbus's crew. And yeah, it caused problems in Europe, but nothing on the scale of what smallpox did in the Americas. Let's talk numbers, because the scale of this catastrophe is almost impossible to comprehend. In 1491, before Columbus, the Americas probably had somewhere between 50 and 100 million people. Scholars argue about the exact number, but even the conservative estimates are huge. By 1600, just over a century later, the indigenous population had crashed to around 6 million. That's a population decline of over 90% in some regions. Some historians call it the Great Dying. Others call it the American Holocaust. Whatever you call it, it's one of the largest demographic disasters in human history. And the majority of it wasn't from warfare, wasn't from slavery, though those killed millions too. It was from disease. Invisible, unstoppable, devastating. Here's what gets me. These diseases moved faster than European explorers. Spanish conquistadors would arrive in a region expecting to find bustling cities and instead find ghost towns, abandoned fields, bodies, survivors in shock. The diseases had gotten there first, spreading from person to person, village to village, faster than horses could travel. Some indigenous people in North America encountered European diseases before they ever saw a European person. The diseases traveled along trade routes, spreading death hundreds of miles ahead of the actual colonizers. By the time English colonists arrived in New England in the 1620s, diseases had already devastated many coastal indigenous populations. The Pilgrims literally moved into abandoned indigenous villages. They thought God had cleared the land for them. No, disease had cleared it. Disease that Europeans brought. The Columbian Exchange transformed the world. Potatoes from the Americas became a staple food in Europe and Asia. Corn fed millions. Tomatoes became fundamental to Italian cuisine. Chocolate became a global obsession. But the cost? The cost? It was paid in indigenous blood, in entire civilizations that vanished, in knowledge, languages, and cultures that disappeared forever. This wasn't an exchange. It was conquest at the microscopic level. And it was just beginning.
February 1519. A Spanish conquistador named Hernán Cortés lands on the coast of Mexico with 11 ships, 600 men, 16 horses, and a handful of cannons. Within 2.5 years, he'll conquer an empire of 25 million people. On paper, this makes no sense. But here's what actually happened, and it's way more complicated than Spanish military superiority. The Aztec Empire in 1519 is one of the most powerful civilizations on Earth. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, sits in the middle of Lake Texcoco in central Mexico. It's home to 200,000 to 300,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the world. For comparison, Seville, Spain's largest city, has maybe 60,000. Tenochtitlan has massive stepped pyramids, sophisticated aqueducts bringing fresh water from miles away, floating gardens called chinampas producing food, organized markets with goods from across Mesoamerica. The Aztec ruler Moctezuma II commands an army of hundreds of thousands of warriors. So how does Cortés pull this off? First advantage, the Aztec Empire wasn't beloved by its subjects, not even close. The Aztecs had built their power through conquest. They'd subjugated dozens of neighboring city-states and forced them to pay heavy tribute: gold, food, textiles, and human beings for sacrifice. Thousands of people every year were being sacrificed on Aztec pyramids. The conquered peoples hated the Aztecs with a burning passion. When Cortés lands, he immediately starts making alliances with these groups. The Totonacs on the coast, the Tlaxcalans who had been fighting the Aztecs for decades. These aren't just a few dozen allies. By the time Cortés marches on Tenochtitlan, his force includes 600 Spaniards and at least 20,000 indigenous warriors. Some estimates put it at 100,000 or more. This wasn't Spain conquers the Aztecs. This was various indigenous peoples armed with Spanish weapons and led by Spanish commanders overthrow the Aztec Empire. Second advantage, Moctezuma's fatal hesitation. There's a legend, probably exaggerated or invented later, that the Aztecs thought Cortés might be the god Quetzalcoatl returning. Ancient prophecies, the timing seemed right, the description sort of matched. We don't know if Moctezuma actually believed this, but we know he was uncertain, cautious, indecisive.
He sent gifts to Cortés, including gold. Bad move. That just told Cortés there was more gold to be had. Think Moctezuma made an even bigger mistake. He invited Cortés into Tenochtitlan as a guest. November 8th, 1519. Cortés and his army, Spanish soldiers and thousands of indigenous allies, march into the Aztec capital. Imagine the scene. These massive causeways stretching across the lake, tens of thousands of Aztecs lining the roads, watching these foreign warriors enter their city. The tension must have been incredible. Moctezuma personally greets Cortés. He gives him a tour of the city, shows him the temples, the palaces, the royal treasury filled with gold and jade and precious feathers. And Cortés is planning exactly how to take it all. Within days, Cortés essentially takes Moctezuma hostage in his own palace. Him and his men move into the royal quarters and simply don't leave. They're holding the emperor prisoner in his own home. The Aztecs are confused, angry, but unwilling to attack because their divine ruler is being held captive. This tense stalemate lasts for months. Then, in May 2020, everything explodes. While Cortés is away dealing with other Spanish forces trying to arrest him for insubordination, his second-in-command, Pedro Alvarado, does something catastrophically stupid. During a major Aztec religious festival, while thousands of unarmed nobles and priests are celebrating in the Temple of Mayor, Alvarado orders his men to seal the exits and massacre everyone inside. The Spanish wade in with swords. They slaughter hundreds, maybe thousands of unarmed people, nobles, priests, dancers, musicians, all cut down during their holiest ceremony. The Aztecs erupt in absolute fury. When Cortés rushes back to Tenochtitlan, the entire city is in revolt. They're besieged in Moctezuma's palace. The Aztecs are attacking constantly with arrows, spears, and obsidian-edged clubs. Cortés orders Moctezuma to go out and calm his people. Moctezuma appears on the palace roof and tries to speak. His own people throw stones and arrows at him. The emperor, betrayed, humiliated, seen as a Spanish puppet, is rejected by his own subjects. Moctezuma dies a few days later. The Spanish claim he died from his wounds. The Aztecs claim the Spanish murdered him. Either way, the emperor is dead. June 30th, 1520. La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. Cortés orders a desperate nighttime escape from the city. His men are loaded down with stolen gold. The Aztecs are waiting. It turns into a massacre. The Spanish are trying to flee across the causeways in darkness. The Aztecs are attacking from all sides, from canoes on the lake, from the causeways with arrows, spears, and obsidian-edged clubs. Hundreds of Spanish soldiers die. Thousands of indigenous allies die. Men are drowning in the lake, weighed down with the gold they couldn't bear to leave behind. Cortés supposedly sits under a tree and weeps at the losses. The Aztecs have won. They've driven out the invaders. Against tremendous odds, they've survived. But then, smallpox arrives. The disease had been spreading through the Caribbean for years. When the Spanish retreated from Tenochtitlan, they left behind infected people, some deliberately, some unknowingly. Within months, smallpox swept through the Aztec Empire like wildfire. Tens of thousands died, maybe hundreds of thousands, including the new emperor, Cuitlahuac, who ruled for just 80 days before dying of the disease. The next emperor, Cuitrondelag, tried desperately to organize resistance, but his people were dying in mass. Warriors too sick to fight, healers unable to heal, the entire social structure collapsing. When Cortés returned in 1521 with reorganized Spanish forces and even more indigenous allies,
he found an empire already devastated by disease. The siege of Tenochtitlan lasted 93 brutal days. The Aztecs fought with incredible courage, defending their city street by street, house by house, but they were starving, sick, massively outnumbered. August 13th, 1521, the Aztec Empire fell. Cortés became one of the richest men in the world. The Spanish melted down priceless Aztec gold artwork and shipped it to Spain. They built Mexico City directly on top of Tenochtitlan's ruins, using Aztec stones as foundations. The Aztec Empire, which had ruled central Mexico for nearly 200 years, was gone. But the indigenous people did not disappear. Millions survived. Today, their descendants number in the tens of millions. Nahuatl, the Aztec language, is still spoken by over 1 million people. The Spanish could conquer an empire, but they couldn't erase a people.
11 years after Cortés conquered the Aztecs, another Spanish conquistador pulled off an even more unlikely conquest. Francisco Pizarro, 168 men, the largest empire in the Americas. The Inca Empire, in 1532, stretched 2,500 miles along the western coast of South America, from modern Colombia to Chile. 12 million people, an incredible road system spanning 25,000 miles through mountains, deserts, and jungles. Cities built at impossible altitudes. Stonework so precise you can't fit a knife blade between the blocks. And Pizarro conquers it in less than a year. How? First, the Inca Empire was in the middle of a devastating civil war. The previous emperor, Huayna Capac, had died around 1527, along with his chosen heir. How'd they die? Smallpox. The disease had reached the Inca Empire before any Spanish conquistador did, traveling down through Central America along trade routes. With the emperor and heir dead, two half-brothers, Atahualpa and Huáscar, went to war over succession. The empire was torn apart, armies fighting armies, communities divided. By the time Atahualpa won in 1532, the empire was exhausted and fractured. Perfect timing for Pizarro to arrive. Second, Pizarro had studied Cortés's playbook. He knew the strategy: find allies among oppressed peoples, exploit divisions, use superior weapons, and most importantly, capture the emperor. November 16th, 1532, the town of Cajamarca. Atahualpa is there with about 80,000 troops, fresh from winning the Civil War. He's curious about these strange foreigners. He agrees to meet with them. He enters the main plaza of Cajamarca with about 7,000 attendants, most of them unarmed. He's treating this like a diplomatic meeting. Pizarro's 168 men are hidden in buildings around the plaza. They're terrified because they're outnumbered nearly 500 to 1. A Dominican friar named Vicente del Valverde approaches Atahualpa. Through a translator who barely speaks Quechua, he lectures the Inca emperor about Christianity, about how he needs to accept the Pope's authority and the Spanish King's rule. Atahualpa asks to see the Holy Book. Valverde hands him a Bible. He examines it. He's never seen a book before. The Inca used knotted strings called quipu for record keeping. He holds the Bible to his ear, expecting it to speak. It doesn't. He throws it on the ground. That's the signal Pizarro's been waiting for. Attack! Cannons fire into the packed plaza. Cavalry charges, steel swords against unarmed men. It's not a battle. It's a slaughter. Thousands of Inca die within hours. 0 Spanish casualties. And Pizarro captures Atahualpa alive. Atahualpa, desperate to secure his release, makes an offer. He'll fill a room with gold. A room 22 feet long by 17 feet wide, filled to a line of 7 feet high. Plus twice that in silver. Pizarro agrees. For months, gold pours in from across the empire. Priceless artifacts from temples, golden sculptures of animals and plants, ceremonial objects of incredible artistry. The Spanish melt it all down into bars. They destroy some of the most beautiful metalwork in human history to make it easier to transport and divide. But Pizarro never intended to release Atahualpa. In July 1533, they hold a sham trial. They accuse him of rebellion against the Spanish crown, of murdering his brother Huáscar, of idolatry. July 26, 1533, they execute the emperor of the Inca Empire by garroting him with a wire. With Atahualpa dead, the empire collapses into chaos. Pizarro marches on Cusco and installs a puppet emperor, but the damage is done. The centralized Inca state, so dependent on its divine emperor, simply falls apart. 168 men conquered 12 million people, but not through military superiority, through disease that arrived before them, through a civil war that weakened the empire, through the capture of a leader whose people wouldn't attack while he was held hostage, and through ruthless exploitation of every advantage. The Inca people didn't disappear either. Millions of their descendants still live in Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. Quechua, the Inca language, is spoken by about 10 million people today. Empires can fall, but people endure.
Spain has conquered two massive empires. They've got more gold and silver than any European nation has ever seen. They're becoming the most powerful country in Europe. But here's the question. How do they extract all that wealth? How do they maintain control over millions of indigenous people with just thousands of Spanish colonists? They create a system, and it's one of the most brutal in human history. It's called the encomienda system. Spanish conquistadors and colonists are granted control over indigenous populations in specific regions. In theory, the Spanish are supposed to protect these people, teach them Christianity, introduce them to European civilization. In exchange, indigenous people provide tribute: labor, crops, goods. Sounds almost reasonable, like medieval feudalism. Except in practice, it's slavery with a different name. Spanish encomienderos force entire communities to work in mines, on plantations, and construction projects. The indigenous people have no choice, no pay or minimal pay, no rights. If they refuse, there's punishment, violence, death. It's the most notorious example is Potosí in Bolivia. Spanish prospectors discover a mountain of silver, Cerro Nico, rich mountain. And it's not an exaggeration. This mountain contains one of the largest silver deposits ever found in human history. Within years, a city explodes around the mines. By 1650, Potosí has over 200,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the world, larger than London, larger than Paris. But this city is built on death. The Spanish implement the mita, a forced labor draft based on an old Inca system, but perverted into something far worse. Indigenous men from surrounding regions are forced to work in the mines. You're sent deep underground, hundreds of feet, sometimes thousands of feet down. The tunnels are barely tall enough to crouch in. You're working at 15,000 feet elevation, where the air is thin. You're breathing toxic dust, mercury fumes from the silver processing, poisonous gases from the rock. You work by candlelight. If your candle goes out, you're in absolute darkness deep in the earth. Cave-ins, asphyxiation, mercury poisoning, exhaustion, accidents with explosives. Working in Potosí is essentially a death sentence. Historians estimate that over the course of Spanish colonial rule, about 8 million indigenous people died in the Potosí mines alone. 8 million people. one mountain, one silver deposit. And all that silver flows to Spain. Galleons leave the Americas, loaded with silver bars. So much silver that it causes massive inflation in Europe. Too much money, chasing too few goods. Spain becomes incredibly wealthy, but they spend it all on European wars, on building palaces, on maintaining their empire. They don't invest in industry or innovation. The phrase worth a Potosí becomes European slang for unimaginable wealth. But in the Americas, Potosí means death. The encomienda system spreads everywhere Spanish colonists go. Sugar plantations in the Caribbean, coffee and cacao farms in Central America, textile workshops, construction of churches and colonial buildings. Everywhere, the pattern is the same. Force indigenous people to work until they die, and then find more to replace them. But they're running out of indigenous people because of the diseases. The population collapse means labor shortages. So Spain turns to Africa. The Atlantic slave trade, which had been operating on a small scale, explodes. Between the 1500s and the 1800s, about 12 to 15 million enslaved Africans are forced across the Atlantic. About 2 million died during the Middle Passage voyage. Different people, same brutal system of exploitation. The wealth extracted from the Americas, built on indigenous and African forced labor, helps fund Europe's rise to global dominance.
April 26, 1607. 3 English ships, the Susan Constant, Godspeed, and Discovery, arrive on the eastern coast of North America. 104 men and boys, not a single woman. They're not explorers or missionaries. They're employees of the Virginia Company, a private business looking to make money in the New World. They're about to establish Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in North America. Permanent is generous, because for the first few years, this colony is an absolute disaster. Let's talk about who these colonists are, because it matters. About half are gentlemen, wealthy or aristocratic men who've never done manual labor in their lives. They've come expecting to find gold, get rich quick, and return to England as heroes. The other half are laborers, craftsmen, a few soldiers, some boys as young as 12. Nobody's a farmer, nobody has wilderness survival experience, nobody's planned for how difficult this is going to be. They're looking for gold like the Spanish found in Mexico and Peru. There's no gold in Virginia. May 14th, 1607. They pick a site about 60 miles up a river they name the James River after King James I. They establish a fort on a peninsula. Why this location? It's defensible from Spanish ships. Remember, Spain and England are still enemies. It's got deep water for docking ships, and critically, there don't seem to be any indigenous people living there. That should have been a red flag. You know why nobody's leaving there? Because it's a terrible location. The water is brackish, part saltwater, part freshwater, and becomes toxic in summer. The ground is swampy, mosquitoes everywhere carrying malaria. It floods regularly. The local Powhatan Confederacy avoided this place for good reason. Within months, people start dying. Summer 1607 is brutal. The water's contaminated, food supplies are running low, dysentery, typhoid, malaria. By September, just 4 months after landing, half the colonists are dead. 52 people gone. Enter Chief Powhatan. He's the paramount chief of the Powhatan Confederacy, controlling about 30 tribes with 15,000 to 25,000 people. Powhatan is watching these English colonists. They're weak, dying, clearly incompetent. He could wipe them out easily. But they have useful things. Metal tools, weapons. Maybe they could be valuable trade partners. So Powhatan makes a calculated decision. Help them. A little. Enough to keep them alive and see if they're useful. The Powhatan people bring corn, fish, and game to Jamestown. They teach the English which plants are edible, how to fish in local waters. Without this help, Jamestown would have died in its first year. That's not an exaggeration. Then comes the winter of 1609-1610, the starving time. Relations with the Powhatan have deteriorated. The English have been aggressive, demanding food, stealing corn, shooting indigenous people. Powhatan orders a siege of Jamestown. No food coming in, no hunting outside the fort. The English are trapped inside their wooden walls. Winter sets in. Food runs out completely. People start eating anything they can find. Rats, mice, snakes, leather from their boots and belts, the starch paste from their shirt collars, soap. They boil shoe leather to extract any nutrition. When those run out, they eat their horses, their dogs, their cats. Then they eat each other. I'm not exaggerating or being dramatic. Archaeological evidence discovered in 2012 proves cannibalism occurred at Jamestown during the starving time. Cut marks on human bones consistent with butchering for meat. A 14-year-old girl's skull showing evidence that her brain was removed and consumed after death. By spring 1610, of the 500 people who'd been in Jamestown at the start of winter, only 60 are still alive. 60 survivors, skeletal, sick, traumatized. They've witnessed and possibly participated in cannibalism. The colony's leadership makes a decision. Abandon Jamestown. They're done. They load the survivors onto ships and start sailing down the James River toward the ocean and back to England. Then, just as they're about to enter the Chesapeake Bay, they spot ships coming up the river. A new governor, Lord Delaware, arriving with supplies and 150 new settlers. He orders them to turn around. The colony will continue. Jamestown survived, barely. It remains a struggling disease-ridden settlement for years. Then in 1612, a colonist named John Rolfe figures out something crucial. He experiments with growing a Caribbean variety of tobacco in Virginia soil. It works beautifully, and Europe is obsessed with tobacco. It's addictive, it's fashionable, it's expensive. Finally, Virginia has a cash crop that makes money. By 1617, they're exporting 20,000 pounds of tobacco to England. By 1628, over 500,000 pounds. The colony's economy is transformed. Land becomes valuable. Settlers start spreading out from Jamestown, establishing plantations along the river. And they need land, lots of land, because tobacco depletes soil quickly. After a few years, you need new fields, which means pushing into Powhatan territory, taking more and more land. And that's going to lead to war.
August 1619, Jamestown. A Dutch warship arrives at Point Comfort, carrying 20 and odd Africans. These people had been captured in Angola by Portuguese slave traders, then seized by English and Dutch privateers who attacked the Portuguese ship. Now they're being sold to Virginia colonists in exchange for food and supplies. This moment, August 1619, is often called the beginning of slavery in English North America. But the system in 1619 isn't yet the brutal, race-based, hereditary slavery that will define American history. Not yet, but it's coming. In 1619, Virginia's labor system is based primarily on indentured servitude. Poor English people, usually young men, sometimes entire families, agreed to work for a Virginia colonist for a set period, typically 4 to 7 years. In exchange, the colonist pays for their passage to America. At the end of the contract, the servant is freed. They might receive freedom dues, some land, tools, seeds, to start their own farm. It's brutal. Servants are often treated terribly. Many die before their contracts end, but theoretically, it's temporary. The first Africans who arrive in 1619 seem to be treated similarly to indentured servants. They're given Christian names. Some eventually gain their freedom. A few even become landowners themselves. There's a man named Anthony Johnson, arrived around 21, gained his freedom, became a tobacco farmer, owned land, even had his own servants. So, what changes?
how does this transform into hereditary racial slavery? It happens gradually over decades through economic pressure and deliberate laws. First, economics. Tobacco is profitable, but requires constant labor, and it depletes soil, so planters need more land and more workers to keep expanding. Indentured servants are expensive. You pay their passage, feed them, house them, and after a few years, they're free. You constantly need new workers. But what if you could own workers for life, and their children, and their children's children? That's infinitely more profitable. Second, the supply of English indentured servants starts declining. Conditions in Virginia are known to be deadly. Stories filter back to England, the starving time, the constant death, the brutal treatment. Fewer English people want to come, but the demand for labor keeps growing. The Atlantic slave trade, already well established in Spanish and Portuguese colonies, offers a solution. English colonists realize they can buy enslaved Africans with no contracts, no freedom dues, lifetime labor. Third, and this is crucial, colonial legislatures start passing laws creating legal distinctions based on race. In the 1400s and 1500s, Virginia court cases start treating Africans differently from Europeans. An African servant runs away, lifetime servitude as punishment. A white servant runs away, extra years added to their contract, but not lifetime. 1662, Virginia passes a law saying children inherit the status of their mother. If your mother is enslaved, you're enslaved, automatically, for life. This makes slavery hereditary and self-perpetuating. 1675, another law declares that baptism doesn't grant freedom. You can be Christian and enslaved. This closes a legal loophole. 20 years later, 1705, Virginia codifies everything in the Virginia Slave Codes. These laws explicitly define slavery as a racial institution. Africans and their descendants can be enslaved. Europeans cannot. Enslaved people are legally property, not human beings with rights. They could be bought, sold, inherited, bred like livestock. Masters have almost total power over enslaved people. They can beat them, mutilate them, even kill them with minimal legal consequences. Enslaved people cannot testify in court against white people, cannot own property, cannot legally marry, cannot learn to read or write. And critically, all people of African descent are presumed to be enslaved unless they can prove otherwise. Within less than a century, Virginia transforms from a system where people of different races worked alongside each other and sometimes gained freedom together to rigid racial slavery. Why? Money, control, and fear. Poor whites and blacks had sometimes allied together, most famously in Bacon's Rebellion of 1676, when they fought alongside each other against the Virginia elite. That terrified wealthy planters. If poor people unite across racial lines, they might overthrow the whole system. Solution? Divide them by race. Give poor white people something enslaved black people don't have. The promise that no matter how poor they are, they'll never be enslaved. They'll always be above black people in the social hierarchy. It works horrifically well. By 1750, tens of thousands of enslaved Africans are being imported annually. By 1860, right before the Civil War, there are almost 4 million enslaved people in the United States. All of this traces back to economic decisions made by Virginia tobacco planters in the early 1600s, to laws passed by colonial legislatures, to a system deliberately constructed to extract maximum profit from human beings. Slavery wasn't inevitable. It wasn't natural. It was built intentionally.
October 12th, 1492 to May 14th, 1607. 115 years. Columbus lands in the Bahamas. Jamestown is established, and everything has changed. The world after 1607 is fundamentally different from the world before 1492. Two hemispheres isolated for 15,000 years are now permanently connected. But let's be honest about what this transformation actually means. From a European perspective, the age of exploration is about discovery, adventure, expansion, the spread of Christianity, the acquisition of wealth, the beginning of European global dominance. European history books call it heroic, transformative, the birth of the modern world. And from a European standpoint, it was transformative. Europe in 1492 was relatively poor, divided, threatened by the Ottoman Empire. By 1607, European nations, especially Spain, Portugal, England, France, and the Netherlands, are on their way to global dominance. But from an indigenous perspective, the age of exploration is the age of catastrophe. It's not discovery, it's invasion. It's not adventure, it's genocide. It's not transformation, it's the near total destruction of civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. Same events, completely different meanings depending on whose story you're telling. So, what's the actual legacy? Legacy 1, the Columbian Exchange, transforms global biology and agriculture forever. Crops from the Americas, potatoes, corn, tomatoes, peppers, cacao, spread throughout Europe, Africa, and Asia. Potatoes alone prevent countless famines in Europe and Asia. By the 1700s and 1800s, populations boom partly because of American crops. But diseases traveled primarily one direction, and they cause a 90% population decline in the Americas. That's not an exchange, that's extermination. Legacy 2. European colonization reshapes global politics and economics forever. The wealth extracted from the Americas, especially Spanish silver from Potosí, transforms Europe. It funds wars, it builds palaces, it accelerates the development of capitalism. But it's built entirely on stolen indigenous land and forced indigenous and African labor. Legacy 3. The Atlantic slave trade becomes a massive industrialized system. Between 1500 and 1870, about 12 to 15 million Africans are enslaved and forced across the Atlantic. About 2 million die during the Middle Passage voyage. The wealth created by slave labor, sugar, tobacco, cotton, coffee, generates enormous profits for European merchants and American planters. That wealth helped fund Europe's Industrial Revolution. Slavery isn't a side note to the age of exploration. It's central. It's foundational. You cannot understand modern capitalism without understanding slavery. Legacy 4. Indigenous peoples faced centuries of conflict, genocide, and forced assimilation, but they don't disappear. Despite everything, disease killing 90% of populations, warfare, forced removal, cultural destruction, boarding schools designed to erase indigenous identity, they survived. Today, there are over 5 million Native Americans in the United States, over 1 million First Nations people in Canada, tens of millions of indigenous people throughout Latin America. The narrative that indigenous peoples vanished is propaganda, a lie told to justify land theft. Legacy 6. Modern racial hierarchies are established during this period. Before the age of exploration, racial categories as we understand them didn't exist. There was ethnic identity, national identity, religious identity. But white, black, and red as racial categories are largely created during and after the Age of Exploration. They're created to justify slavery, to justify colonization, to create legal and social distinctions that allow Europeans to exploit and dominate other peoples. And once those categories are established, they persist. They're embedded in legal systems, social structures, economics. They shape everything that comes after. Segregation, Jim Crow, apartheid, modern systemic racism. You can draw a direct line from the racial categories created during the Age of Exploration to modern racial inequalities. That's not ancient history. That's the foundation of the world we live in now. Legacy 6. The Age of Exploration marks the beginning of European global dominance that will last for centuries. By the 1800s and 1900s, European empires control most of the world. The technologies, attitudes, and economic systems developed during the Age of Exploration spread to Africa, Asia, and Oceania. The Age of Exploration is the beginning of that process, the moment when Europe realizes it can conquer and colonize other parts of the world. So when you hear about Columbus Day or the Age of Discovery, remember the other side, the indigenous side, the African side, the side usually left out of heroic narratives. Remember the 90% who died, the empires that fell, the cultures destroyed, the people enslaved. Remember that history isn't just about great men doing great things. It's about millions of ordinary people, indigenous, African, European, whose lives were caught up in forces they couldn't control. October 12, 1492. One voyage, 3 ships, 90 men. And 500 years later, we're still living with the consequences. The Age of Exploration changed everything, for better and for worse. Mostly worse, if we're being honest. That's the real story. That's what actually happened.
Before you go, here's something crucial to understand. American history didn't start with Columbus. That's just when Europeans showed up. Before 1492, there were thousands of years of incredible history in the Americas. Ancient cities that rivaled anything in Europe. The Mississippian culture building enormous earthwork pyramids. The ancestral Puebloans constructing cliff cities. Sophisticated agricultural systems feeding millions. And going back even further, 15,000 years ago, the first people who walked into completely empty continents and built entire civilizations from scratch. Those stories, they're just as important, maybe more important. So, if you want to understand the complete story, not just the European version, but the whole truth, hit that subscribe button, because we're going back, way back, to tell the stories that textbooks leave out. The real history, the complete history, the history that actually matters. Subscribe. Let's keep uncovering the truth together. Everything you learned about American history in school, it's incomplete. They taught you Columbus discovered America in 1492. But here's what they didn't tell you. People had been living here for 15,000 years before that. We're talking about ancient civilizations that built cities larger than London, pyramids that rival Egypt's, agricultural systems that fed millions, trade networks spanning entire continents, the Mississippian culture, the ancestral Pueblans, the Olmec, the Hopewell, Cahokia, a city of 40,000 people in what's now Illinois, 1,000 years before Columbus. This channel tells the complete story of American history, not just from 1492 forward. We're going all the way back to the Ice Age hunters who first walked into empty continents, to the civilizations they built, to the empires that rose and fell centuries before any Europeans set sail. This is the history they don't teach you. The stories that textbooks skip, the truth about who was really here first and what they've actually accomplished. If you want the real story, the whole story, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications, because we're uncovering thousands of years of history that's been ignored, erased, or forgotten. Every week, we're diving deep into America's hidden past, from the first mammoth hunters 15,000 years ago to the sophisticated societies Europeans encountered, to the clash of civilizations that changed the world forever. No fluff, no clickbait, just accurate, detailed history that'll completely change how you understand America. Subscribe now. Let's rewrite what you think you know about this continent. The real story starts here.